Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or whenever you should happen to find this. Welcome to the Quote of Arms podcast. I'm here today with.
DougYNerd.
Welcome, DougYNerd. Great to have you. And today the tribe we're going to talk about is.
Pegasii, or Pegasus is if you really want the tongue twister in there.
Oh, Tuggy boy, talking about Pegasii with the Toon Summon Skull. we're talking about the Greco-Roman though, right?
The Greco-Roman Pegasii as opposed to the Theros Pegasii?
Well, I think Theros is designed around Greco-Roman. I
Well,
was
that's
talking
true.
about that as opposed to the mildly effeminate Yu-Gi-Oh villain.
That's right. We were talking about this previously, and my complete lack of background with Yu-Gi-Oh! You warned me this joke was coming, and I still had no idea.
Oh, yeah. I gotta hit them when they're not expecting it, eh?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I was actually more just trying to get that joke out of the way early. Oh, Tuggy boy. No, I'm not gonna keep doing that because that's creepy. Anyways. so, what are... So when we're talking about what are Pegasi like, it's actually kind of difficult because there are actual creature cards and there are tokens, and they aren't necessarily playing that well together. So, what are the creature cards like that are
So
Pegasi?
with Pegasii, I've got them pulled up right now out here on Scryfall, and you've got basically 3 or 4 token generators, and then there's 20 Pegasii that have ever been printed in the history of Magic. It feels like it should be more than that, but it just isn't. And the majority of them are French vanilla 1/2s. You look at stuff like Mesa Pegasus, the original one. It's a 2 mana 1/1 with flying and banding. You keep on going down. There's Pegasus Charger. It's a 3 mana 2/1 that's flying in first strike, and that's really kind of the quality you're looking at for the majority of the tribe. Recently, we've started to get a little bit more, and they kind of started giving definition to what these cards actually do. You're starting to get not a hate bear feel, but kind of it's a magical flying horse that does magical things feel. Vryn Wingmare is probably the most popular example. It's a 3 mana 2/1 flyer that says non-creature spells cost 1 more to cast. Kind of your classic hate bear. And then there's Starnheim Courser out of Kaldheim, which was a 3 mana 2/2 flyer that says artifact and enchantment spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Those are kind of the stuff that we're getting more and more of recently. And then the other big thing is the totally obvious thing that you see with Pegasi in history is horses with flying that you can ride. In other words, horses with flying that can give another creature flying, which is part of the problem with the tribe, honestly. If you play Pegasi as a tribe, they all fly, but they want to give other stuff flying as well. So it's kind of a torn thing that you have to play with there. If you're going to build a Pegasus deck, is to say, okay, if I'm really going to play all of these, what am I going to do with all these ones that grant other things flying?
Mm-hmm.
Is a problem you're going to have to address.
And what is it that you're actually granting flying? Now,
Right.
they are primarily based in one color, which is.
Absolutely white. There's one non-white Pegasi. It was just printed in Modern Horizons 2. It's Tizarus Charger. And it is kind of aggressively costed, at least. It's a 3 mana 3/2 without flying, but you can have it escape from your graveyard for 5 mana and 5 cards. And it will escape with a +1/+1 counter or a flying counter on it, so you can kind of choose between the two.
Well, one of the things we were discussing is, in terms of, so this now puts them into both white and black. And
Yes.
there is a white and black commander that wants you to be able to deal combat damage and could really use an evasive ability like flying. And that is Timna, the Weaver, who also seems to be based off of Theros. I'm not sure if that's canonically true, but I know that it looks like it could be at least. But
Yeah, I mean, it certainly seems like it would fit the theme.
mhm. So the cool thing is that it works mechanically with the tribe, it works color-wise with the tribe, and it possibly even is thematic with the tribe.
Yeah,
So,
for myself personally, when I built my Pegasi deck, that Black Pegasus didn't exist yet, so I
yeah.
went mono white personally. I do see that Timna it would be really really good with the tribe though, especially if you're leaning more into the creature cards
Mhm.
themselves rather than the tokens.
Although the
Just because
question then comes, are you a Pegasus deck or are you a Tymna deck that has Pegasii in it?
well, I mean, it makes some sense that you would want a commander that would ride the horse. You could even do kind of the themed thing with Gideon and have him be his Rule Zero commander because he's well known in the Theros block for riding a Pegasus.
Interesting. You could also put in some of those, some of the black cards like Unlikely Aid, which shows him riding something else that's flying.
Exactly.
Riding Rakdos,
I believe that was after the horse was killed, so that's shaky ground for a Pegasus deck.
Oh, yeah. Still, just that image of Gideon riding on, I think it was Rakdos, is hilarious.
Yes. It's definitely a good time out there.
Well, I mean, you also then have the escaped one where you can say, hey, maybe that's what happened to his poor horse.
I like that idea. I really do. Makes it fit a little bit more with the tribe.
Yep. So, the creatures primarily have flying, or they have flying. They grant, and some of them grant flying. Some of them have taxing or reducing effects. What are their stats like?
You're really not going to get a big Pegasus. I think that looking at it here, Archon of Sun's Grace is both the most popular Pegasus per EDH rec, and also is the biggest Pegasus at the same time. It's a 4-mana 3/4 with flying and lifelink, and it says Pegasus creatures you control have lifelink. I really wish this had been kind of the commander for the tribe, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
But it also, on top of that, has Constellation. It says whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, create a 2/2 white Pegasus token creature with flying. So it's actually one of the token generators as well, but it makes a bigger token than any of the rest do. All the rest are 1/1 white flying tokens.
It works nicely with Sacred Mesa, too.
It absolutely does. So Sacred Mesa is probably the best of the Pegasus token generators outside of maybe Stormherd. And it's just a 3-mana enchantment that says at the beginning of your upkeep you have to sacrifice a Pegasus or sacrifice it. And then you can just pay 2 mana to make a 1/1 Pegasus.
Yeah, always great to have mana sinks, because I always, so in my deck building formula, I always put in more lands and ramp than really a reasonable deck probably should, because because you always have something to do with the mana, but you don't want to get screwed.
So my Pegasus Safara deck it's my main mono white deck, and I definitely fall in the camp of not believing that mono white can't be good. And I think that one of the things that people don't do enough of in that regard, as far as saying, oh, mono white's bad, is they don't play enough of the activated abilities that white has. Mobilization and Sacred Mesa both used to be staples in EDH format. Because you could kind of just sit back and say, well, I'm going to make 1/1s until you do something about it. And that's still a very viable tactic, in my opinion. And it's something that you can do that will keep the important cards in your hand. I mean, I'm well known with this deck when I play it to basically just play a Sacred Mesa or a Stormherd or even a Pegasus Stampede, just one of my token generators, and sit there on it and just only do that until something happens where I need to protect those tokens or I need to respond to something else that's going on. Because at the end of the day, if I have 1/1 flyers, it's eventually going to ping you to death, especially if I have any kind of group pump for it. If I have any kind of effects that are going to give everything +1/+1 or that kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's in there, but one of my favorites is Charge Across the Araba.
I don't play it in mine. I do like that card a lot. As far as the pump stuff that I play in my Pegasus deck, I have the Spear of, who's the white god?
Heliod.
Yes. So Heliod Spear is in there. It plays Coat of Arms, of course, because it's a tribal deck.
Yes.
And then
We love Coat of Arms here. That's what we're named after.
Exactly. And then Rally of Wings is actually one of my favorite. It's for 2 mana and instant. It untaps all your creatures, and then all your flying creatures get +2/+2.
Beautiful.
Yeah, so it's a good combat trick either way. Whether you're looking to do an Alpha Strike and not get swung out on the next turn, or if somebody attacks into you and you're tapped out, you can use it either way.
Yeah, one of the things about Coat of Arms as a card that was said recently was somebody told me that they didn't know that Coat of Arms pumped their opponent's creatures, and I said, well, does it really matter if they're already dead?
You're not wrong.
If you put down coat of arms, then you should be expecting to have more creatures of your type out there than the opponent.
Yeah, I mean, and sometimes you'll get wiped, but even in that case, Pegasi don't really care that much because they fly. So if you can survive a turn with somebody that's not really built around the tribal theme, or even somebody that is that also got wiped out by the board wipe, then you don't really mind all that much because you can just play down a whole bunch more Pegasus tokens and swing out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was bringing up Charge Across the Araba. I have a mono white flash deck. I call it Hixus Trixus. Hixus
Mm-hmm.
Prison Warden is the commander. And that deck is designed around well, operating on opponents' turns, and especially something like playing a big like White Sun Zenith, and then untapping and charging and doing exponential damage to everybody.
Right. Yeah, I mean,
Sometimes,
go ahead.
well, I was gonna say like you spend 1 mana on like Brave the Elements, and then you do that.
Yeah, so Brave the Elements is also in my Pegasus deck as well. I really, really love just the versatility of that card, whether it comes to saving your own stuff or because it gives the protection, you can also just use it as a means to alpha strike as well if people have a whole bunch of blockers out.
Yeah, another excellent reason to play a mono white deck, which people would say, okay, why are you playing that color? Well, because mono white has excellent ways to invalidate board wipes. And when you're
Yes.
playing an aggressive deck or a deck that wants to commit to the board, instead of playing your own board wipes, just use theirs.
So I leaned heavily into that with my personal deck, and it's not exactly for only that reason, although it helps a lot with board wipes and that kind of thing. There's a lot of different things that you can do, like Second Sunrise and the new 4 mana one that you play ahead of time, and it brings everything back at the end of turn. There's a whole bunch of those effects in white that can kind of say, okay, you did a board wipe, but I'm going to get all my stuff back. And the reason I play a lot of those is actually because of the card I mentioned earlier, Pegasus Stampede, which is an old buyback card from Stronghold. It's 1 and a white for a sorcery. It says buyback, sacrifice a land. So most people just stopped reading at that point, but it lets you put a Pegasus token into play, essentially. And then you can just buy it back by sacrificing a land. Well, you combine that with land tax effects and a whole bunch of the Second Sunrise type stuff that can bring stuff back at the end of turn, and you actually can kind of play around with that a little bit and make a whole bunch of Pegasus tokens while sacrificing a whole bunch of lands, going to get a whole bunch of new lands in your hand or onto the battlefield with all the land tax effects, and then getting it all back at the end of turn so that you actually end up not just ramping to get even like most people say with white, but actually getting ahead as well.
Awesome. And there are also some lands that you want to sack, like Flagstones of Trocaire.
Yes, so that's a big one in there, and then I go one step further and I go find some old reserve list stuff like Scorched Ruins and Lotus Veil.
Mm-hmm.
That's getting a little pricey. They're both $40 lands at this point, I believe, but they have you sacrifice 2 lands when they come into play. And that will also keep you at a relatively even mana count, the same way that a Karoo land would, but keeping you on the same kind of mana because it still the Scorched Ruins taps for 4 mana, the Lotus Veil taps for 3.
Absolutely. So doing those things to be able to maintain a certain amount of mana, but also to generate a board state and be able to continue churning through library. Things like Tithe work too, although that's also a reserve list card.
Yes, it is. That's also in here. I've embraced the mono white expensive cards that don't do a whole lot thing to maybe an unhealthy extent.
Yeah, so I have some of those cards in, say, Quintorius. So I use the glut of lands in hand that effects that white has to be able to rummage through them with Faithless Looting type effects.
Yep.
Then I have them in my Maya Redguard Protector deck with exploration effects, so just put them out for more landfall. But it's cool that you can recycle them in a number of different ways. And I always draw blanks on the name of this card, but there's the artifact that lets you play lands from the graveyard, which can also help.
Crucible of Worlds, which I do, yes, play.
Oh yeah.
On top of that, I also kind of go further and do the Zuran orb thing where I can sacrifice my own lands. There's a couple other white cards that also let you sacrifice lands for effects. One is an old prophecy card that broke that limited format called Troubled Healer that just lets you sacrifice to prevent 2 damage to target creature or player. And then there's also the one that I forget the name of it right now, but it lets you sacrifice it to destroy enchantments, which can also get you pretty far.
Nice.
But yeah, if you can artificially make it so you have less lands than your opponents, the other nice thing is you also solve your what do I make fly with my Pegasii problem by playing all of the Loyal Warhound effects. All those land tax effects that are stapled to little creatures, you can use those as part of your attacking horde if they gain flying as well as getting you lands in play.
Nice. So what are some examples of those land tax effects attached to creatures?
So the newest one is Loyal Warhound. It's from the Forgotten Realms set. It's a 2-mana 3/1 with Vigilance. When it enters the battlefield, if an opponent controls more lands than you search your library for a basic plains card and put it onto the battlefield tapped. So that's kind of the newest one that's doing that kind of thing. There's also kind of the more famous variants like the I'm forgetting card names here. There's Knight of the White Orchid is kind of the famous one. It's a 2-mana 2/1 with first strike. I'm going off of memory here. Let's see if I can pull it up real quick. Knight of the White Orchid. It's a 2-mana 2/2 with first strike, and when it enters the battlefield, if an opponent controls more lands than you search your library for a plains card, put it onto the battlefield, and then shuffle. So there's that side of things where they put them directly into play. There's also a couple others that will put them into your hand as well. Oreskis is, I believe, the name of it. Let's see here. Oreskis Explorer is the one I'm thinking of here. It's a 2-mana 2/2 Cat Scout. When it enters the battlefield, you search your library for up to X plains cards, where X is the number of players who control more lands than you. You can then reveal them and put them into your hand. So that will actually get 3 or 4, or it will get you 3 plains if you really are doing your job right and having a lot less lands than anybody else.
Nice. Is the cartographer in there?
I don't personally play the 4-mana cartographer just because it is 4 mana.
Yep.
We're starting to get enough of these little 2 and 3 mana ones. There's even one in the Pegasus tribe, Boreas Charger is what it's called, that you don't really need to go and do the expensive stuff that's going to guarantee you a land drop. Because if it all works out, I should be land taxing hard enough that I always have that. I hesitate to say mana advantage considering I technically have less lands, but I'm rigging it certainly so that I always have less.
Oh yeah, and that puts them directly onto the battlefield, I think. So yeah, you wouldn't necessarily want that. But
with Boreas Charger, it does, yes.
When I was thinking of cartographer, I think.
Yes, cartographer does as well.
Yeah, which isn't necessarily what you want, because you want the other taxing things.
It can and can't be. Yeah, so one of the lesser, probably the worst of the Pegasus token generators is Pegasus Refuge. I had to scroll all the way down the page to even find this here. And it's a 4-mana enchantment. It says 2, choose and discard a card, put a Pegasus token into play. And so that's really what I'm doing with the land tax half of it. The rest of the time I'm actually very happy to just have more lands in play, however, because I can sacrifice them for benefit, or I can use them to sacrifice or return to my hand for the various lands that tap for more than 1 mana, keeping me ahead on mana but not on lands, essentially.
So, dovetailing a little bit, so they are small flying creatures with some additional abilities.
Yes.
What makes them different from angels or birds or griffins or any of a number of other small white flyers?
As a Pegasus player, the number of spirits that we keep on getting is highly upsetting. I feel we need to lean away from spirits and back into Pegasus. There's a whole bunch of different various 1/1 flyers out there, 1/1 flying tokens out there, certainly. Pegasi do not have this all to themselves. despite having Storm Herd and Sacred Mesa as kind of staples that we see a lot in the Commander format. What really makes them different, in my opinion, is just the aesthetic feel, as far as the tokens go, at least. I've That's really what drew me to this. I've loved Pegasii for longer than I can remember. If you are around for the old VHS tapes, I forget the name of the production company here, but I remember even at a young age really liking the one that there's a Pegasus that flies in and is there part of their theme that you'd see at the beginning of every movie you watched as a kid. And I remember from that time on just being like, these are so cool, and really liking them. When Hercules shows up with his Pegasus in the Hercules movie, I absolutely love that as well. It's just been something that I've always really liked. If you're talking mechanically, though, honestly, you're picking between you're purposely picking the worst tribe. If you want 1/1 flyers somewhere, there's so many different ways you can do this that are going to be better for you. Just Kaikar by itself is like, okay, so I can do spirits all day. And that's only one portion of it. You could do spirits in all 5 colors if you wanted. Same with birds. Birds are out there in white and blue and are very well represented. There's just a ton of different tokens out there that are probably going to do you a little bit more than what Pegasii do. So if you do stick with Pegasii, at least for now, until R&D gives us a little bit more love, you are kind of purposely choosing a worse tribe on purpose because you like how it looks, is at least my interpretation.
So I think TriStar was the name of the company that you're thinking of.
That sounds right, yes. Yes.
Because that one has the horse facing the camera with the wings spread out.
Yep.
Nice. So, one reason to play Pegasii is because you like the aesthetic of it. Just in terms of what the actual creatures look like. Another reason could be because you like the way that it pairs up with creatures that don't have flying, and so it's kind of a combo, kind of a synergy.
Yeah, there is certainly some of that. No matter how you build the tribe, I think you are going to end up with a couple non-members of the tribe in the deck, and it's good to have those things that give them flying to start with, because you can go that way. And we talked earlier about Timna, and that's certainly not the only commander out there that wants to swing in. You could certainly build a Pegasus deck where you're just giving your commander extra evasion through your Pegasii, and that's very doable.
Mm-hmm.
But
I'm not sure who the other partner would be in that case, unless I was going to go Timna and Ravos. But I like the idea of having commanders that you want to give evasion to, and basically organizing it so that you have like maybe 10 Pegasii that grant flying and 10 creatures that you want to have ride them, and have it be more of a Pegasus rider deck than an actual like wild free refuge Pegasus deck.
Yeah, and I mean, that's not hard to do anyway. For the longest time with my Pegasus deck, I just stopped doing this literally last week. I always build on a theme. All of my decks are always on a theme. Even my stupid powerful ones, I always try and sneak at least a little bit of a theme in there. Mm-hmm. My one for the Pegasus Tribal was literally just, I'm going to play every single Pegasus cards, even the ones that just have one in the art, like Island Sanctuary. I'm going to play every single one. I just stopped doing this last week because it finally got to the point where we have 25 Pegasus cards now, and I started going, okay, it's really starting to be hard to find room for all this, and it would be really easy to just kick Armored Pegasus, the 2-mana 1/2 flyer, out of the deck, and put an actual useful card in instead. So there's certainly a lot of room to kind of do that half and half.
So at what point does it cease being a Pegasus deck and just become a generic deck?
I think at the point that you're not really leaning into Pegasii anymore. So you were talking about, hey, you could take these ones that grant them flying, and you said 10. There's not that many, actually. Okay. But at the point where you're really kind of looking at it and you have more creatures of a different type besides Pegasii, or you're not interacting with the tokens anymore, that kind of thing, I think you're then at that point leaning away from a Pegasus deck. And that's something I have to watch with my own personal deck. It's a mono white lands matter deck. As you imagine, that takes up quite a bit of room, and it's not really that ingrained in the tribe, other than Pegasus Stampede specifically. So I do worry about that, especially now that I'm taking cards out, that I'm going to end up leaning away from the tribe. But I think as long as it's kind of the core concept, where you're playing more Pegasii than you're not, and you're interacting with their abilities and with the tokens specifically, I think you're really still in the tribe.
Okay. Yeah, I was actually starting to think about making it a Grant flying deck, which I think is different from being a true Pegasus deck. It's only taking one element of it.
Yeah, and I think there's only 3 or 4 of those total. So you're still not quite there. And that would definitely be somewhere you could use them in a different deck that wanted that effect, because you can certainly find that effect in places.
Yeah. Just that, I mean, that winds up being a deck that has Pegasii in it, but isn't really a Pegasus deck.
Exactly.
Granted, that might go more thematically at what Pegasii are supposed to mean or do.
Yeah, I guess that is an interesting thought. You know, they're, at the end of the day, they are horses with wings that are known for basically letting the hero get places. So that would make some sense. I think you could thematically build that. You probably have to do it around a specific story, though, if I had to guess, to really make it feel like the Pegasus thing.
Well, there are some creatures, I believe in blue in particular, like the Student of Elements, which was from the original Kamigawa, where if it gains flying, you flip it over, and then all creatures you control have flying, I think. So
yeah,
it's a creature that wants to gain flying and then become a universal enchantment.
I mean, I would imagine that there is dozens of these kind of effects here. If we look up gain flying and just kind of see what comes up,
Yep.
That comes up with 486 cards to start with. There's certainly no small amount of creatures that have been giving flying. I specifically remember from my old limited days in Mercadian Mass, there's Balloon Peddler even. There's a Spell Shaper that does it. There's lots of leap effects,
Well,
that kind of thing.
Some give themselves flying, but yeah.
Yes, there is that as well. But there's still a lot that give other creatures flying, certainly.
Yep.
To the point where some people have actually used it as an attacking weapon before. I've seen that in a couple decks. There's a lot of cards out there, especially in green, that punish people for having flyers, and I've certainly seen it before with, I believe it's Predator Flagship, as an artifact that can grant creatures flying, and then you can basically shoot them out of the air, just independently. So that's certainly a strategy that's been tried.
I used to have a blue-green kitchen table deck that gave opponents creatures flying using it was a blue enchantment. You pay a generic and a blue to give a creature flying, and then there was Raking Canopy, deals 4 damage to an attacking creature.
I was thinking Hurricane, but same idea, yeah.
Hurricane was in there too, yeah.
Well, I've been playing so long that the first ones that come to my head are always the ancient cards.
Yeah, that would happen. So, you touched on it a little bit with the production company TriStar and how that's a callback to something that you grew up with.
I've been having that theme music play in my head nonstop since we mentioned it.
Yep. So, why are Pegasii so important to you?
To me, personally, I mean, it's kind of like almost like the unicorn thing you see all over fantasy literature, where the unicorn kind of represents purity. Probably the most famous example these days of that is the whole Harry Potter thing, where Voldemort ends up eating a unicorn to extend his life and that kind of thing. It has to be a pure thing for him to be able to live longer.
Yep.
It's similar to that, but Pegasus always just kind of, with me, resonated a little bit more. I think I liked the idea of them flying. But at the end of the day, it is, you mostly are going to see them represented in white because they are a symbol of purity. And I think that the added component of them being helpers also struck a chord with me personally, where it's not just purity for the sake of purity. I am this pure thing, and I'm going to bring that out to the world as much as I can and help where I can.
So if we're in like the Greco-Roman mythology, how is a Pegasus different to you from, say, a griffin?
I mean, I don't think that a griffin is going to be as friendly. I don't think that it's going to be as acceptable of you riding it, even if there are examples of otherwise. It's a horse. It's supposed to be a friend. We've known horses for thousands of years and bred them to be friends and companions. They're supposed to be, I mean, maybe not biologically, but certainly historically, they're supposed to be a helper, a companion, and a friend all in one. Something that you can really have a bond with. And I think that the idea of that with wings attached is just about the coolest thing there could be.
Nice. And that's where I was going at the rider versus the wild one, because wild flying horses sound kind of scary.
I mean, my favorite Pegasus card is Pegasus Stampede. I will, I will say.
Yeah.
So maybe I'm not representing the tribe well with that.
No. I'm just being silly. So, you mentioned your the commander that you have with your Pegasii is.
So far as Sky's Blade, it's a 7-mana commander, 4 colorless, 3 white, or white. And it says to get around that immediately, you may pay white and tap 4 untapped creatures you control with flying rather than pay the spell's mana cost. And then it has flying and lifelink, and most importantly, it grants other creatures you control with flying indestructible. So
okay.
The big thing with this deck is I kind of already mentioned it's a mono white lands matter. On top of that, also play a lot of 2 mana, or play a lot of the Sun Titan recursion, where you can grab something back from the graveyard that costs 3 CMC or less, or put it into the battlefield. There's becoming a bit more of those kind of effects lately. Seven's Reclamation, those kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
And they can grab lands, which helps with the mono white lands matter. The other thing they can really do is there is a whole bunch of little tiny white enchantments. There was a cycle of them back in the Urza's block that says at the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice this if there's 4 or more creatures in play and destroy all creatures. There's another one for artifacts and enchantments as well. And you can bring those back with your Sun Titan effects. Mm-hmm. But more importantly, you can, with the creature one specifically, you can have your commander in play and have all your creatures gain indestructible, and then start recurring that every turn. It's not a very nice thing to do, but it ends the game fairly quickly when everyone else is getting board wiped during your upkeep every turn, and all of your Pegasii are just fine.
Yeah, that's where on my recent article I had if you gave the Glissa the Darksteel plate and then had something that blows, or have like Nev's disc.
Yep.
You can just blow up the world every turn and have your Glissa be fine, and just recycle all the artifacts that are of yours that are getting destroyed.
I also play a Sapling of Kolfanor deck, which is a 5-mana Golgari indestructible commander, and I had somebody approach me about it and say, hey, why does every single copy of this on EDH, why is there like 80% World Slayer in this deck? And they hadn't quite put it together that if you have an indestructible commander with World Slayer, which just says if it deals combat damage, it destroys all other permanents, that your commander also sticks around, so you can just keep doing that every turn.
Yep.
To be clear, I do not do that. But I understand why it's on the EDH page.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, Planar Collapse is the name of that card. It's a 2-mana Urza's Legacy enchantment that says during your upkeep, if there are 4 more creatures in play, sacrifice it and destroy all creatures that can't be regenerated. So it's Wrath of God every upkeep if you can manage to recur it.
Yeah, at one
and
point
that with
I had a
indestructible flyers is a bad deal.
Yeah, at one point I had a Heliod deck that was Heliod Wrath Tribal, and just keep blowing up the world and have Heliod make a bunch of 2/1s.
I play a Boros Tajik deck that plays all of the and each player damage board wipes, simply so that all my creatures will survive, and I can keep swinging and also put pressure on everyone's life totals with earthquakes and things like that deal damage directly to players.
Yep. Oh, that sounds nasty.
It's Boros, so it's not all that good, but it's fun to play. It's rare that you get to lean into a pure aggro deck, and I really enjoy it for that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, in terms of pure aggro, my Isamaru dog deck is It's kind of like that. Although that's where I go into instead of playing. So you have a commander that makes your creatures indestructible. With Isamaru, I have a so I use cards that recover quickly from wraths or that like the second sunrise type effects. Everything that died comes back.
Yep.
So I just use other people's wraths.
Yeah.
So
That's gross.
I don't think I play any wrath effects in there. I just play either effects that give indestructible or effects that bring all my stuff back.
Yeah, and I don't play many Wraths in this deck. I used to play a couple more Wrath of God and those kind of things. Honestly, I felt like I didn't need to. Most people are looking to solve a mono white deck by just waiting for you to overextend and then board wipe you. And it is usually a good way to deal with it. But again, if you lean into that activated ability token maker type of life with Sacred Mesa and things like that, you can keep the mana open to do things like Second Sunrise that will protect you from Wraths. And on top of that, you can also have an indestructible commander. And on top of that, you can just kind of sit back with 7 cards in your hand and make tokens until someone deals with you.
Yep. Safar also happens to be just a large creature that gains you some life. And you could theoretically just swing somebody 3 times.
Yeah, when I put the deck together, I wasn't planning on being as dependent on Safara as it's ended up being. But, getting 4 flyers down early in the game and having a 7/7 lifelinker it swings some life totals. It really does. That 14 life point swing every turn is a big deal.
I used to have a series of $50 decks, and one of them I made that actually went under 30, I think, was Safara. It was basically just all the Rustwing Falcon effects and such.
Yep. Yeah, it's kind of a different take on Edric Flying Men.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that wound up being pretty nasty.
Yeah, I mean, early 7/7 flyers with lifelinker, they're just a problem.
Yep.
They really are. Not to mention everything else getting indestructible.
Yep. Although Safara does happen to be an angel, so if you were going to design a legendary Pegasus, what would it look like?
So I think there's 2 different ways to go with it. I think that as much as I'm glad that we're getting more and more relevant Pegasii that are actually creatures themselves, I do think that the heart of the tribe is tokens. And so I think there's 2 different ways you go with it. You could either do a commander like Archon of Sun's Grace that is a token generator itself, or you could do something that searched for enchantments or made enchantments better, because then most of the token generators in the tribe are enchantments. So I think that would actually get you a large part of the way there. But honestly, even just a Lord would be great. At this point, it wouldn't take much to knock Safara off the top of this deck for me. If they printed any kind of Pegasus commander, even if it wasn't that great, I'd probably still go with it. I'd have to change some things, obviously, because I wouldn't have the indestructible anymore. But, even just a Lord that said, Pegasus creatures all gain +1/+1, and whenever they attack, they can give something else flying would be awesome,
I wonder, what if it was something like a slightly less powered Greater Oromancy stapled to a creature?
I don't remember Greater Oromancy off the top of my head.
I think that gives all your Enchantment Shroud.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't. Yeah, it's other enchantments you control up Shroud and enchanted creatures you control up Shroud. I wouldn't hate that.
So if instead of that, it was hexproof, say.
Yeah, I think you'd have more people use that as an enchantment commander, but it would, if it was a Pegasus, I think it would certainly get used as a Pegasus commander as well. I'd almost rather, and I can't believe I'm saying this, I'd almost rather have the tutor effect. However,
oh, absolutely. I'm just saying in terms of embracing the pure pristine angle. I think hexproof could fit. I think that effect should exist more than it does in terms of being able to protect them.
Sterling Grove.
Yeah.
Sterling Grove might be the better comparison that I would enjoy then, because it does essentially the same thing except for it's green-white, but you can also pay 1 and sacrifice it to search for an enchantment and put it on the top.
Mm-hmm.
And as much as I'm usually not against tutors necessarily, I believe that variance is something to be embraced. I think that the tribe would really benefit from you being able to go get your sacred mesa and really start the token thing early. Because where I've noticed with my deck, where it really bogs down is if I start drawing and thinning out my deck by getting all the lands out with land tax, and I still can't find a token generator, it's really hard. You struggle to get Safara in play. You struggle to get enough Pegasii to really swing out and win. It's just a lot harder if you don't have one of those token generators to rely on.
Absolutely. So, what's one color that you wish that they would either bleed into or just have as a secondary color?
I honestly hope they don't. I like the individual black Pegasus we got. I like the design of Tizarus Charger, even though it's kind of just a limited thing more than anything else. It's supposed to be your, aggressive 3-mana 3/2 that then comes back later as a flyer for the late game, and that's a great limited design. I enjoy the card and the entire idea behind it, but I think that it should be a limited thing. I really do think that Pegasii should stay mono white. And that should really be where the tribe lives.
Okay. I'm just thinking about it in terms of, like, unicorns are, at least the commanders are base white, splash green.
Yeah, and I think the difference there is simply the flying. Green doesn't really embrace flying for the most part. The mono green dragons we get every once in a while are kind of the exception, but outside of that, you really don't see it, and I don't think that we should.
Right, but
I agree that if there was a second color where they made sense, it would be green despite the flying.
I was thinking of actually having it bleed into blue a little bit because of the giving things flying. It's something that blue usually does.
I think that specific ability, that makes sense. I don't think that it does fit blue's color pie, though. I think white cares about flying just as much as blue does, if not more. And there's nothing really blue about a flying horse. It's not like a swan or a duck where it's going to come to rest on water or anything like that. And it's not really cerebral like you see with blue.
I think I remember seeing
the full color wheel here and kind of go through all the words of what blue cares about, but I don't think that many of them would line up with flying horses.
I think I remember seeing a blue card that has a unicorn or has a Pegasus on it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I have to remember what it is. It's a 4/1. It's a 4/1. It's an old card.
Sea God's Scorn is a blue bounce spell.
I mean, that would fit my purview, but not quite what I meant.
That is, at least with the art tagger on Scryfall, that is all I see in blue. There is a very prominent Pegasus on Overrun. If you remember that artwork with the tiger and the snake and the deer and the Pegasus. I've always really liked that art.
There was a 4/1 it is a blue card. It's a 4/1. I can't remember exactly what it was called.
The only one that comes to mind when you say that is Dan Danford. And I know that's not it.
Oh, Frostwalker's a 4/1, but that's not what I'm talking about. Well, I'll see if I can try to remember it. But otherwise, so interesting little.
I think
design.
You might. So I Scryfalled up everything that was a 4/1 in blue. And the only one I can see that you might be thinking of is Phantasmal Forces, which you're right is a very old card.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of, I think.
It's actually not Pegasii, however. They're birdmen or angels. I couldn't tell you exactly which one. The art is kind of vague on that. It is a very cool old art, though. It's got three of them with huge outspread blue and red wings. They're all in kind of full, really cool helmets with plate armor. And then with various weapons, a sword and a spear, and I could not describe that last one. Double-sided Morningstar.
Looking at a blown-up version, there are things that are behind them.
Yeah. I would imagine those are more of them, but it could be Pegasus. Yeah. That's possible.
I don't know. I thought I remembered it being a Pegasus, but maybe it's just the long helmet.
Yeah. I agree that it does look a lot like it. I see exactly where your head's at with that.
Yeah. Okay. I remember because I was doing a mono white game or a mono white border game, and I was looking at cheap white border flyers.
Outside of the point in Hercules where Pegasus grabs a sword in his mouth and starts brandishing it, I don't think that we've armed Pegasii quite yet. No weapons of war for the horses.
Good, good. They're too noble and peaceful, right?
Exactly.
Well, thank you for being on the cast. Was there anything else that you wanted to talk about with Pegasii?
No, you let me burst to the seams about my personal Pegasus deck and my love for all things Pegasii. You got the TriStar theme stuck in my head. So
Nice.
yeah, I think I've done everything I need to do here.
Absolutely. So where can people find you?
I write a weekly top 10 list every Friday over on EDH Rec. It's called Two Specific Top 10. The idea being that instead of just your normal top 10 lists where you'll see, oh, these are my 10 favorite cards from the new set and all that kind of thing, I will instead make it data based on the card's EDH Rec score, and I will generally narrow it down to something extremely specific, so you're looking not at just the same 10 cards. I've had Soul Ring end up at the top of the list twice in the entire series that I've been doing for 2 years now. But outside of that, it's usually going to be some rather obscure stuff. My next week article that's coming out has 15 cards total that fit the criteria in the entire history of Magic, for instance.
Nice.
So yeah, every Friday on EDH Rec, Two Specific Top 10. Check it out.
Awesome. Look forward to reading some more of that. So this has been J-Ro, the Unsummoned Skull, and hope to see you next week.